do have quorum, so I'll call this meeting to order.
That's wording correct.
I have a motion to approve the agenda. Now, the agenda was recently updated. I think everyone should have received that. The updated agenda. Yes, no?
It was just probably half an hour ago. There's just a new motion on here, so well, we can get to that. It's motion 12 with regards to approving the allocation of the surplus to the reserves. So we can talk about that when we get there.
Okay. So is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Would you like to add anything to the agenda? Hearing none. Could I have a motion that the agenda for May 7th, 2020 regular meeting of the Pelham Finance and Audit Committee be adopted? Could I have a motion to move that, please?
Motion.
Michael, seconder, Bill.
Yeah,
Teresa.
Sorry, the agenda that's been published right now does not have 7.3, which has been an amendment, and 7.3 is the appointment of the auditors. So we have to amend the agenda that's been published.
Okay. So
that's the amended.
So 7.3 has to be added for the appointment of the auditors. Could I have a mover on that, please? Sorry, Trevor, you can't. Michael, seconder, Bill, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. So now can we approve the agenda? Let's see. So we did have a mover by Michael, a seconder by Bill. So can we all in favor of the agenda as amended?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right. So declaration of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Anyone to declare? Seeing none. Approval of minutes. So the last time we met was March 5th, 2020. Draft and revised terms of reference of the Pelham Audit and Finance Committee be approved. Any discussion with respect to those minutes? Seeing none, could I have someone move that we accept the minutes?
John, can we just have a correction on my last name in the minutes, if that's okay?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just missing an M.
Oh, apologize for that.
No worries. It's small. It's nothing major, though.
Everywhere he seconded.
Yeah.
Or moved.
Yeah, but meanwhile, under the presence, your name is correct. Under members of presence. Okay. I should have caught that, Bill, shouldn't I?
Yeah. Oh, it's okay. It happens.
Okay, so with that amendment, could I have a motion to approve? Bill with 2 M's and Michael. All in favor? Carried. Okay. I don't think we have any business arising from the minutes, do we, Teresa? No. Okay, so new business, 7.1 audit. So Trevor Ferguson of Deloitte, and I guess I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I'm used to, obviously, as we all are, to being on site in the council chambers. So I'm assuming that everybody has a copy of the package in front of them. Okay. I've got 7.1 in front of me. This is our report to the audit committee on the results of the 2019 audit. Before I get started, just wanted to say 2 things. Number one, our condolences to everyone on the passing of the councillor. It's very sad news. So our thoughts are with all of you. The second thing that I would point out is just a big thank you to Teresa and Charlotte and the team. We conducted the audit remotely as required through physical distancing measures, excuse me, and they were great, super helpful throughout the entire process. The fact that we're here on time, it was a true testament to how well prepared they were and how helpful they were throughout the audit. So my thanks to both of you and our entire team. Thanks you. So I'm going to look like I'm looking over here and not right at the camera, sorry, but that's where I've got the presentation. So I promise I'm paying attention. So I'm just going to skip through a couple of things here. I'm going to go to the title of the page I'm looking at is Our Audit Explained. This is on page 17 of 107 in the package that I have. Hopefully that's the same page numbers everybody else has. So title of the page is Our Audit Explained, and there's a box in the top left-hand corner called Audit Scope and Terms of Engagement. Does everybody have? Is everybody with me? Okay, yeah, good. So in terms of our audit plan, in terms of engagement, we performed our audit exactly in accordance with the audit plan that we presented. So no changes to that whatsoever. I'll get to the audit risks in just a minute because we'll go into more detail in a few pages. With respect to materiality, obviously we didn't test every transaction that happened at the town over the course of the year, so we did perform our audit with the concept of materiality in mind. We based our materiality on total revenues. Our quantitative materiality worked out to about $700,000, just for reference. So if we found a misstatement that was greater than that, we would consider your financial statements materially misstated. We have a reporting threshold to this committee, which is about 5% of our materiality, and that worked out to about $30,000. So if we identified any misstatement greater than that $30,000 threshold, we'd be telling you about it today as part of this meeting. However, if you flip to the next page, on the top right-hand corner, you'll see that there's a box called misstatements, and you can see that there are none. We did not identify any misstatements. So again, a true testament to Teresa and Charlotte and the team. So thank you very much. And by the way, I should have said this off the top. I noticed that everybody is on mute, but if you do have questions, don't hesitate to ask as we go through. There's no need to wait till the end or anything like that if there's something that you want clarified or want me to go into more detail. On the bottom right-hand corner of this page, there's a box called Uncorrected Disclosure Misstatements, and again, there are none. So what that means is that in our view, your financial statements disclose everything that they're required to in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. And the last thing we'll point out on this page is just that box in the top left-hand corner called Status and Outstanding Matters. There are a couple of things listed here, but those are only listed there because the financial statements have not been approved by council. So once that happens, we'll be able to take care of all three of those items and complete our audit procedures. So there's nothing that we're waiting for from management at this time. So if we can flip down one more page, I'm looking at a page that's got two boxes on the top half, one called Fraud Risk and one called Independence. So I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in just a second, and we had a discussion as part of the audit plan as well, but as part of our role as your external auditors, we're required to consider the risk of fraud in our audit of your financial statements. So there's a number of procedures that we performed as we're required to, and needless to say, we did not identify anything unusual. So I'll get into some of those procedures in a little bit more detail in just a minute. With respect to independence, obviously we're required to be independent in order to be able to provide you with an independent auditor's report. So clearly we're in good shape there, and you've got the draft opinion with you that's attached at the front of your financial statements. The last thing I'll touch on this page is just around significant accounting practices, judgments, and estimates. There are a number of estimates that go into the preparation of your financial statements. So there are also a fair number of hard numbers, if you will, that are reasonably straightforward, but a lot of estimates, certainly around some accrued liabilities. When you think about the town's employee future benefit liability, for example, that's a big estimate. There's a lot of, you're estimating discount rates and things like that. In that, you're always estimating around collections of receivables, and there are lots of things that go into your statements that require estimates. Needless to say, we are comfortable with the process that management has for developing the estimates, and we're comfortable with the estimates themselves. So if I could direct you to the next couple of pages, what we've done is we've copied directly out of our audit plan some of the audit risks that we've identified. Now, just by way of touching back on what I mentioned in our audit plan presentation, this is by no means a comprehensive list of our audit risks. This is just some of the risks that we want to bring to your attention. So we've copied down the risks on the left-hand side of the page. The middle column is our audit response, again, directly out of our audit plan. And on the right-hand side, we've added a new column being our audit results. And you can see for all of those points, we've identified them as being no significant issues noted, which is a good thing coming from us. There's a little asterisk on the first page I'm talking about with respect to revenue and deferred revenue amounts. And on the following page, there's one beside management override of controls. That is because Canadian audit standards requires that we presume a risk of fraud in our audit of your financial statements. That is the same for any audit of any financial statements in Canada, regardless of the accounting framework followed, the size of the entity, no matter what. So it is not specific to the town by any means. But what it does mean is that in those particular areas, we do a fair bit more testing than we would if something was a normal risk or something like that for that matter. So with respect to revenue, we do a fair amount of testing, particularly around obviously your taxation revenue, development charges, and any conditional grants. That's where we focus a fair bit of our time as far as revenue testing is concerned. The other one with respect to management override of controls, the theory here is that you could have the best internal control system possible, but if there's an opportunity for management to override that system, then it renders the system useless. So some of the procedures that we perform here are just in relation to try to test whether or not there's an opportunity for management to do that and whether or not perhaps they've done that. So I'm looking at some of the audit response bullet points here on the page. So a couple of things that we do. One is to test a sample of journal entries entered into throughout the course of the year to make sure that the entries are properly prepared, properly approved in the normal course of business, things like that. We have about 144 indicators that we look for as part of when we're testing journal entries. And probably one of the biggest things that we have to do in relation to our journal entry testing is to make sure that we actually got a complete set of all the journal entries. And I can assure you that testing to make sure that whether or not we got a complete set is a lot easier said than done. So needless to say, we're comfortable with what we received from management. The other two things that I'll point out here, one in terms of accounting estimates, we do what we call a look-back test. So we'll take a look at any significant estimates that were made as part of your 2018 financial statements and find out what the outcome of those estimates were. And the theory there is to look at them all and see if there's perhaps a bias for management to be overstating or understating estimates on a regular basis. Again, we did not identify anything unusual as far as that's concerned either. And the last thing that I'll point out here is just discussions that we've had both with management inside and outside the finance department and with this committee. You'll recall that we had a discussion as part of the audit plan process about this, so we don't need to rehash that discussion now. So those are some of the procedures that we performed, and we're comfortable with respect to that risk. If you could flip the page, the title of the next page I'm looking at is Other Reportable Matters. A few things that I'm just going to highlight very briefly on this page. The first is just in terms of significant difficulties encountered in performing the audit. There are none. And I point this out particularly because the audit was conducted remotely. I know I said that off the top, but it is impressive how smoothly the audit went given the remote nature of it. So that's, again, a testament to the team you have in place. The other thing that I'll bring to your attention in terms of post-balance sheet events, there are none that are being disclosed in your financial statements. Obviously, we're all aware of COVID-19 and the financial impacts that it has had to several businesses and organizations. We discussed this with management and agreed that disclosure in your financial statements probably wasn't needed at this time, but it is something that we considered, and I'm sure you'll probably see it in a number of other organizations. So I just bring it to your attention just so you know that it was something that was considered. If we get into the appendices, and I'm going to go pretty quickly here. Appendix 1, these are our communication requirements to you, directly out of Canadian audit standards. So over the course of 2 pages, we've listed our 20 communication requirements. And on the right-hand side, we've added a reference column to tell you where we've told you about all of these items. So a number of them are either referenced to places on our master service agreement or audit plan or somewhere in this document. And again, a number of others are noted as being none or none noted, which is always a good thing coming from us. Appendix 2 is just a copy of our independence letter, just stating the fact that we're independent. So that's there for your reading pleasure. In Appendix 3, that is our draft management representation letter. That's what we'll be asking management to sign off on as part of the completion process of the audit. There are no unusual representations in that representation letter. It's very straightforward. So I don't propose to go through it in any detail, but it's there for your information. And the last thing that I'll point out here is just Appendix 4, some resources for the committee. We've put out a significant number of points of view and thoughtware with respect to COVID and the related business impacts. We've got a number of things that are public sector and government oriented as well that are on our website and you all have access to. So if it's something that you're looking for, I'm not trying to do a sales pitch, but if it's something that you want to have a look at, you're more than welcome to do so. So with that, that's it for our report. So I will pause there and simply take any questions that you have or go through anything in more detail.
So Trevor's seeing no one clicking off their microphone. It appears that there's no questions with respect to what you presented so far.
Okay. Now, Teresa and Charlotte, did you want me to go through the statements or did you guys want to do that? It's up to you. They're your statements, but I can speak to them if you want.
I think we would prefer if you went through them and then we can answer any other questions.
Okay. So I'm scrolling down to your financial statements. The cover page starts on page 33 of 107 of the package. So hopefully everybody's with me. I'm just scrolling into the independent auditors report that starts on page 35. This is what's now considered a standard independent auditors report. You will recall a couple of years ago that it changed. So this is a standard clean opinion. And again, this will be signed once the financial statements are approved by council. At the bottom of page 36 there, it's got a date of May 7th as being the date of our audit report. We're going to amend that because that'll change and be the date that the financial statements are approved by council, not today's date. So if we get into the numbers themselves, so I'm moving on to page 37. So I'm looking at your consolidated statement of financial position. So it's broken out between your financial assets, your liabilities, and at the bottom, the non-financial assets. So if you look at the top half of your financial assets, you'll see you had a significant increase year over year. Last year, you had about 15.3 million, and this year you're at 21.2 million. Large piece of that is relation to the increase in cash and cash equivalents. And if you look down at the middle half of the page, you'll see your liabilities have gone down. Last year, you're about $56.7 million, and you had this year about 54.5. So big decrease in your bank indebtedness, which is always a great thing. Slight increase in your accounts payable and accrued liabilities, and obviously you had the debt issuance as well of $4 million, which partly attributes to that increase in cash and cash equivalents. And at the bottom half of the page, you got your non-financial assets being your capital assets and your prepaid expenses. So overall, if you look at your net debt position, slightly above that non-financial assets territory, that's considered a key figure when one looks at a set of government financial statements. And last year, your net debt was nearly $41.5 million. and that has improved this year rather dramatically, and now you're in a net debt position of about $33.2 million. So that's a big shift. So that's something to be proud of. If you scroll down to your statement of operations, we get into a little bit more of the reasoning for why some of those changes happened. So obviously we've got your revenues, expenses, and annual surplus. Your revenues increased substantially year over year, almost by $6 million. A large portion of those increases are a little bit due to taxation revenue, and a big chunk is the gain on sale of land that was held for sale. So last year you had about $300,000, and this year you have almost $4 million. So that's a big chunk of where that increase came from. But you can also see when you go down to your expenses, last year you had total expenses of $24.5 roughly million, and this year you're down a couple $100,000 in total expenses. So again, you've generated a whole lot more revenue while incurring fewer expenses, which is always a good thing. With all this resulting in your annual surplus of just under $6.1 million compared to about $100,000 last year. So that's a very big shift. If you flip the page down to your consolidated statement of change in net debt, this is really a reconciliation of your net debt year over year and how it's determined. So it breaks down, it starts with your annual surplus, which we just saw on your statement of operation, and goes through the changes in net debt and arrives back at that $33.3 million figure at the bottom of the statement. And that ties back to your statement of financial position, or what's commonly referred to as the balance sheet. And the last statement that I'll speak to is your statement of cash flows. Just because I'm an auditor geek and like to talk about this statement of cash flows, I'm going to go through it. So this is broken out into a couple of sections. You've got your operating activities, your capital activities, and financing activities. The big chunk is at the top, being those operating activities. And again, you can see the subtotal there. You generated $14.1 million in cash from the town's operating activities throughout the course of the year. Now, part of that is the gain on sale, the proceeds of selling the land. But still, needless to say, it's a significant increase year over year. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see you used far less cash than you did last year to acquire tangible capital assets. A lot of that is as a result of the Meridian Center being complete. And then in terms of your financing activities, you'll see that you used about $3.5 million in cash compared to generating 11.7 last year. But a lot of the reason why you generated that cash last year was because of the significant increase in bank indebtedness. So it's a good thing. So overall, year over year, your cash position, you can see, increased by about $6.5 million, which is, I keep saying this, but it's a good thing. I don't propose to go through the notes to the statements. They are very consistent year over year. There were no changes in accounting policies over the years, so you'll find them to be very consistent. It's just really just a couple of minor wording changes that were made and just updating the numbers year over year. So I think I'll pause. And really, and the trust fund statements are after that. I don't think we need to go through the trust fund statements. So I think I will stop there and just simply take any questions or go through anything in more detail.
So no question, but just a comment from my perspective. I want to congratulate Teresa and Charlotte on great work over the past year on managing our finances. You know, things were pretty bleak at the beginning of the year, and obviously we're not out of it yet, but we made great strides thanks to your stewardship. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Wink. Our focus is, you know, and it has been, is the replenishing of the cash. That's been our focus, and also just cost containment in our budgets, and just being very careful and with expenditures. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So any other comments from members of the committee? Any questions?
So this is where you can go in camera and Charlotte and I can leave. And you can ask Trevor any question that you want in camera with regards to the audit or anything that you want to ask of him.
Teresa, so the agenda copy that I have, the management summary of the financial statements is before that item?
Yeah, that's right, 7.2, sorry. So there's the motion there that, that the Pelham Audit and Finance Committee received the 2019 Deloitte report for information. And then we have management summary if there's any questions for that from.
Yeah, so could I have someone move that motion, please? Michael, Marianne, you can vote on stuff too. Okay, seconded by Marianne. All right, all in favor? Carried. Okay, so yeah, we'll move to in camera at this point.
Okay, I will stop streaming.
Okay, so Councillor Wink, you have to read before we go into in camera, you have to read the reason why you're going into in camera. So it's that motion that you have.
Okay, audit committee may, or that the next portion of the meeting be closed. Pardon me? Sorry?
Yeah, no, Laura, before you go in camera, Councillor Wink has to read that. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just read what's in bold. So that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider the following: 239 2B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal employees, and 239 2J, a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, or financial information that belongs to the municipality or local board and has monetary value or potential monetary value. So could I have a motion to move in camera, please? Bill, as a mover, seconder by Michael, all in favor? So carried. Thank you.
Live streaming has stopped. Live streaming is stopped, and I'm just going to stop the recording.
Pelham Finance and Audit Committee hereby direct the chair to provide a letter to council forthwith indicating, whereas the Pelham Finance and Audit Committee received the 2019 Deloitte report for information, and whereas the Pelham Finance and Audit Committee received the 2019 Town of Pelham consolidated financial statements, and now therefore that the committee hereby recommends that council approve the 2019 Town of Pelham consolidated financial statements. So could I have a mover, please? Bill, seconder, Michael. Any discussions? Seeing none. Let's see. All in favor? So carried. So then 7.3, appointment of auditors for 2020. Does Trevor stay for this or?
Normally not.
No.
But we are in the public. We would have to go in camera, back in camera. But
That's fine. I'm happy to sign off if that's best.
yeah.
Thanks, Trevor.
Okay, thanks for everything, Trevor. Really appreciate your work.
Thanks, everyone. And I hope this doesn't impact your next decision, but David, go Bills. Okay.
Reasonable people can disagree.
Fair enough. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Okay. So appointment of auditors for 2020. That the Pelham Finance and Audit Committee recommends that council appoint Deloitte as auditors for the 2020 calendar year. Could I have a mover, please?
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Don't they have a contract already? Like, why would we be voting on this if they have a contract?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, there is a 5-year contract, but every year the audit committee has to appoint the auditors because there could be a situation where there could have been an issue with the audit or the auditors. So there's always that opportunity for the audit committee to cancel the agreement. So my past experience in all my audit committees is that the audit committee has to appoint the auditors.
So one question though, Mr. Chair, before you put the motion on the table,
yep.
Can we ask staff how the audit went from their perspective in relation to evaluating Deloitte, and if there was any concerns from staff's perspective before we put the motion on the table?
Okay, so normally this is asked in camera. So I think we need to go back in camera just because we're dealing with the auditors.
I'd agree with that. So,
as do I.
Well, don't worry, it's like a 2-minute thing. So you just motion to go and close to ask questions about the caliber of the audit. Move second, and
yeah,
I think is running the.
I'll move it.
Okay, Michael, seconder, all in favor? Carried. So we'll go in camera at this point.
We're streaming now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So going back to that motion that the Pelham Finance and Audit Committee recommend that council appoint Deloitte as auditors for the 2020 calendar year. Could I have a mover, please? Bill, Michael, seconder, all in favor? So carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we're at the 8.1 operating financial reports report to council. So Teresa, I'll turn that over to you.
Okay, so this report is the December 31st, 2019 report that the audit committee is used to receiving. It's in that same format that you normally get. So we have detailed revenue report with all the notes there. We have a detailed expenditure report with all the notes why things have gone up and down. We have the 12 months for the Meridian Community Center, which we're very pleased to announce that at the end of the year, we're actually down $400,000. So either we have both an increase in revenue from the projected budget and a decrease in expenditures. So that was really good news. Big part of that has to do with the utilities. There's about $250,000 of savings in the utilities for the community center with regards to all of the initiatives that was taken on by the Utility Sustainability Committee. And also the activity at the community center is just incredible. The arena revenues, so the budget was $539,000 and it came in at $611,000. So a lot of activities, even the public skating. The director of recreation just comments on the number of people that are coming public skating. So it was, the community center has been very well received and a lot of things going on in there. We also received a grant, the grant for the seniors, there's senior grant, and so there's a whole new, as you know, that the community center is a designated senior hub, and there's only a few of them in the province that have that designation, and we're one of them. And so there's a lot of activities happening there with the seniors. And even now with the COVID going on now, they're doing a lot of activities online. So those programs are still continuing with the seniors. That's very exciting. And then from these reports, you can see all the activities that, the actual activities that happened. And then there's the hydro chart, and it's nice to see that in comparison to the first year, how much lower the actual consumption is for the hydro. And then the last appendix is the one relating to the transit. And the transit is just about almost $9,000 over the original budget. The ridership is up quite a bit. The ridership in 2018 was 7,259, and in 2019 was 8,476. So a lot of good activities with the transit. And then also we have here all the capital reports. So we have listed the 2019 capital projects and the status of the projects. And also there's a column here showing the carry forward, that some of these projects that aren't completed, we're going to complete them this year. And then we also have, we always show prior years projects that were approved in the prior years, but still not completed. Some of these projects are very large, and it's multi-years. It could be a few years to complete some of these large road projects. But this is important for council to know the status of these capital projects and where we're at with them. So I think that covers all of. Sorry, I went on with the number 9 and 10 as well. So I kept going here. So if there's any questions with regards to any of these specific reports that the committee is used to seeing, this is more detail than you would see in the financial statements.
Teresa, there's just also under earlier on the agenda under 8.1 and 8.2, just to make sure we don't miss it, is the summary report on the year end, and then the recommended surplus allocation for the year. So I just wanted to make sure if we move on with these ones, we circle back to those ones as well.
Right. So 8.2 has a breakdown of the surplus. So the first one is the operating budget, which had a surplus of $988,572. There was a transfer as part of the reserve policy. We transferred out $147,000 to the land reserve, and that's something that we're going to be doing for the next 10 years in order to bring that negative reserve balance down to zero. And then there was a transfer from the roads reserve for the winter control. So with winter control, if we go over, last year was a very cold year, then we have to borrow. We transfer from the reserve to cover the shortfall. If there's a surplus in that account, then we transfer into the reserve the surplus in order to help in those years when we're short. So so the overall surplus, the excess of revenue over expenditures, this is the modified cash basis, is the $962,338. The other areas, the building permit. So the building department is self-funded. Any excess in revenue goes to the building permit, the building department reserve. And this year they had a surplus of $243,509. With regards to the water rate, so we actually had a deficit this year. I think there was lower consumption in water, and that all relates to the weather. There was a lot of rain last summer. So there was a deficit of $73,896. So there was a transfer from the water reserve to cover that shortfall. This budget has to balance out to zero. The wastewater, the revenue less expenses also had a deficit, and that was $24,380, and we had a transfer the wastewater reserve to cover that shortfall. So these are our budgets. And then at the bottom of the sheet, we have the 2019 tax levy. So our operating surplus, what we're recommending that we allocate that surplus to various reserve accounts. And so we have them listed here. As you recall, when we brought the reserve policy to the audit committee, there's a large gap of, the amount of funds that we actually have in the reserve and what we actually need to meet the future capital needs. So we're just trying to allocate a little bit to these various reserves here. Charlie, did you want to go through some of these here? I can go through them too.
Sure. But yeah, sure, I can. Yeah. So the first thing we recommended we do is transfer back into the roads reserve for the winter control. So the way that the reserve and reserve policy is written, we have to do the transfers the way that they're outlined. So even though we knew we had enough in the operating budget to cover that shortfall in winter control, the policy says that it gets transferred from the roads reserve, so that's what we did. But we're recommending essentially we put that back into the roads reserve because there was enough to cover it for this year. The second item is to transfer into the roads reserve to cover the capital budget shortfall. So council may recall that when we prepare the capital budget, we compare on a cash flow basis what we will bring in terms of reserve transfers and grants based on what we're anticipating compared to the expenditures. And there was actually, on a cash basis, the expenditures exceeded what we anticipated coming in or from the tax levy through reserve transfers. So we're recommending we also transfer that into the roads reserve. And one of the main reasons we're focusing on the roads reserve there is you may remember when we projected the reserve balances, the roads reserve is the one that really has the greatest need because there are so many capital projects coming down the line. The next item is the elections reserve towards the cost of a by-election. The next one is and then all of the next few, facilities, IT, parks, planning, cemetery, and municipal drainage. Essentially, we looked at the amount that was left, and then we compared their deficit balances. So all of those reserves are in deficits. They have negative balances. So we took their proportional share compared to each other and recommended that we transfer the remaining amount in there in order to try to reduce their deficits. And then that leaves approximately $100,000 in the working funds reserve for contingencies related to COVID-19.
So those balances that you move to reduce the deficits, that does not reduce their deficit then?
It won't wipe them out entirely. Okay. No, it will reduce them, but it's still not enough.
Doesn't eliminate it.
No.
It doesn't eliminate it, but it starts to reduce it, and then that's what's critical here. We have to start moving towards reduce the deficits and then building the reserves to actually be the right number to meet the capital needs that we have. So it's supporting the philosophy of the reserve policy.
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with that. I was just clarifying the language for myself, really.
Well, I have a question, and I think I know the answer, but I'd rather ask it anyways. So the audited financial statements we just reviewed, the difference between those and what you're presenting now from a December 31st, the surplus is significantly different. And I assume it's the accrual versus modified cash basis that's creating that, but just wanted staff to comment to confirm that that is in fact the case.
Yes, there is a significant difference between our surplus that we show on our financial reports to council, which are based on a modified cash basis. So for example, we have items in our expenditures, such as reserve transfers. So if an amount transfers into a reserve, on the financial statements, that's not an expense. So that creates like a different net surplus number on our financial statements than it shows on the monthly reports to council. Another example would be principal payments on debt. So our budget includes an amount for the principal payments because on a cash basis, we have to pay that debt. But principal payments on debt are not an expense in the financial statement. So that's why you will see a different number. It won't necessarily tie into the financial statements, but there is a note in the financial statements. I'm just going to see if I can find it quickly. And it is based on a report that we're required to bring to council every year. And it's found in note 15 to the financial statements. And that is where we reconcile the budget as you see it on the financial statements compared to the budget as it's presented in these reports to council.
And then one other question. So actually, I'm going to make a comment first because I didn't do it earlier on when we reviewed the financial statements. So I wanted to commend the staff on the clean audit in live streaming in camera, because I think I did that in the closed session. So kudos to you. Also, in relation to the result of the financials for 2019, this is definitely the town is moving in the right direction on this. And the recommendation put forward on replenishing reserves and planning for the future, I think is definitely would have my vote for sure once that goes to the table. So I just wanted to comment on that before I asked another question I had. And it's in relation to the recommendation of a reserve. So the one recommendation is the 100K for COVID is tough. And I don't know what the impact of COVID is expected to be on the town, but my question is knowing the surplus situation that you're fortunate to be in, and if you have a line of sight of the impact or potential impact of COVID, is 100K a good amount, or is that allocation to do in light of this pandemic that we're all wrestling through and working through?
So I'll answer that. In looking at, so, Charlotte and I, we had that conversation, and a couple of things. One, we are all waiting. The municipalities are working together, the 12 municipalities plus the region. We meet on a weekly basis to talk about the impact of COVID. And we are looking towards federal and provincial funding. We don't have the reserves. We don't actually have the cash in the reserves for us even to put more money towards COVID, but we're also looking towards the province and the feds to alleviate some of that pressure for us, which is what they said they're doing. If we don't get anything from the province or the federal government, and whatever the number is, then that, because we don't have cash in the reserves, in these particular reserves, then we would have to apply the deficit into the 2021 budget. So to start off the 2021 budget, it'll start off to cover this year's deficit. That's how you take care of it. You can't have a negative budget. Like, the council can't approve a deficit budget, but you can have a deficit in year. So which is what we are going to have with regards to COVID. Yes. So that's the strategy. Right now, the cash that we do have in the bank is covering the obligatory reserves and the revenue. We have to have that cash. We didn't have that cash before. So that's where we have to meet the municipal guidelines that's a requirement for us to have that cash, and we can't touch it. So I can't spend the DC obligatory reserve. I can't spend it because it's development charges for COVID. So that's where we're really being strict on that, because that's how the town had issues in the past.
Okay. So part of it is strategic.
Yes.
In the event funding opportunity presents itself, the town would be well positioned to put their name forward for some support in relation to COVID relief.
Right, and the region right now is collecting the information on behalf of the 12 area municipalities plus the region to do one submission to say this is the impact of COVID to the Niagara region. And I know, David, if you want to talk like what the CEOs are talking about with regards to that, it's just like to speak in one voice to say that there's, a big need for support.
We're saying the same things you are, Teresa, just with, fewer of us are accountants. So I say things debit equals credit. That makes do for the financial discussion. But no, in all seriousness, exactly that. Obviously, our conversation is a little more about politics, a little less about the actual accounting function. But we are in lockstep.
Yeah, so it is very strategic, Bill, to see if we can get funding first. And then if we can't get funding, then we will go to the tax base.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, and I just wanted to say, I think this is a pretty solid package now. The detail, has improved significantly from previous years. And so again, I'd just like to thank the staff. It's been a tremendous move forward. Nothing's ever perfect, but it's a significant improvement, and thanks for your efforts.
Thank you.
So looking at the agenda, there's nothing there to say that we move to accept the reports. Is that correct?
Right. Well, so we should say that that the Pelham Audit and Finance Committee receive the reports. So the operating financial report, the MCC operating financial report, the transit operating financial report, the capital report, and those reports. We should say that.
Okay, so could I have someone move that we accept those reports? Bill, Michael, seconder, all in favor? So carried. And Teresa, there was something that the reserve report, do we have to then make a motion on that?
Right. So with the reserve report, because we have that recommended allocation of the surplus to the reserves, we would like this motion to go to council that the Pelham Finance and Audit Committee receive the reserves report, and that the chair include in his letter to council to recommend the approval of the surplus allocation to the reserves. So that's what we would like if the audit committee is in agreement.
So any comments with respect to that? Okay, so could I have a motion then to accept the reserve recommendations? So Michael, Bill, all in favor? So carried. Thank you. Do you want to talk about financial risks, Teresa?
I don't have anything under that. I mean, right now, with regards to the COVID-19 report, that is going directly to council at the May 19th meeting. So I would say that that's the area of financial risk that we have right now.
Can you talk generally at all about that? Just that wouldn't be out of school with what's going forward to council, or?
Well, what we're doing is we're looking at the. So as you're aware, we closed down the Meridian Community Center, mid-March, and all the activities there have been shut down. So we're looking at all the revenue sources, the 2020 budget, and updating that budget to say, if this activity doesn't happen, what's the revenue shortfall, and looking at our expenses to say, where have we increased our expenses in relation to COVID. So for example, we're doing a lot more cleaning. So our cleaning expenses have gone up, bylaw officers, there's more enforcement. And but then on the other side, we have had layoffs, so we have salary savings because certain activities aren't happening. So we're just doing an updated projected what the impact of that is. Also, we've waived interest and penalties for property taxes and water, wastewater for 3 months. So for April, May, and June. So that alone is $100,000 of a cost to the town, because it's approximately $30,000 to $27,000 and $30,000 a month of lost interest revenue. So I would include that as a lost revenue. So just going through the list of just the revenue impact and the expenditure impact, and then what is the town doing to mitigate some of that, the cost. So I would list that as well, to say what are some of the things we're doing to save and to bring that number down.
Strategically, at the start of, well, about a week into the pandemic, we wrote a sort of a quick and dirty report to council on the very initial sort of financial shock. Here's stuff we do know, right? Like a week in. This report that Charlotte and Teresa have been working on is a much deeper dive. And here we are 6 weeks to 7 weeks later, 6.5 weeks later, working on a much deeper dive. We haven't exactly negotiated. I don't think any of the three of us know exactly when we'll bring the next one, but I kind of, as a default, like around the 6 week mark. I want there to be enough change. I think this one will have a very good analysis of, obviously, of costs incurred. That's relatively easy to do. Where our minds are going next are in reopening and how we're going to have to do business differently. And differently is almost universally a code for more expensively or less efficiently, but one of the two is almost always correct, right? With more distancing tends to lead to either lower volume or somehow higher cost, right? Whatever that is. For instance, it does not look, our choices are either come down to installing, fiberglass barriers in the trucks that the public works staff use, and that might work, or one truck per. So at the moment, we've temporarily leased more vehicles, but the town of Pelham keeps a really tiny, like a small fleet. Per capita, we do not have a lot of motor vehicles. So going forward, we're either going to have to figure out and endorse to council that we lease more or buy more, or but somehow that's going to be higher. And we haven't wrapped our minds around that. And I think that'll be where we go with the next report in about 6 weeks from now, because there'll be a bunch more best practice. We are not alone. Several other I think every other municipality worth its salt's having this conversation right now and trying to figure out what the new normal looks like. But kind of across the board, I cannot conceive of a new normal that doesn't involve us doing a deep clean of the town hall monthly, more often if we figure out someone's had coronavirus and been in the building. That's $1,200 to $1,500 a pop, for instance, right, on top of an already enhanced cleaning. Probably more vehicles, see where that's going. But those pieces I don't think we've been able to do through no fault of our own, but I don't think we've been able to do a deep enough dive, and I don't think we fully appreciate our new cost structure, and I think we'll be able to give much better advice on that a month and a half from now, give or take a little bit.
And the other thing too, in talking to the director of recreation and of what she's hearing from her group, is that, we don't even know of something as, simple as hockey in September. Can you actually have the kids or the hockey players come in? They're saying now they don't want anyone to take showers. So you have to come in fully clothed, just put your skates on and leave. And can you have X number of people even on the ice? So we don't even know any of that. And that definitely will have an impact on our revenue. If they can't have full games. Just think of Junior B. A lot of the revenue comes from people attending the games. And what if they can't? We can't have crowds. What does that mean for the Junior B team? And,
just the whole use of the facility. Yes. How can you even open the doors and let anybody through the doors? But I think at least you're going to get a good handle on what your minimum cost level is to have that facility
Right.
not, you know, not operating, but functional.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a scary proposition.
Yes.
And all of that is, is directed by the province. It's not, public health. We don't have control. So that's what we're working on.
So would it be worthwhile? I know there's a report going to council. David, you had said that 6 weeks after, roughly 6 weeks, I won't hold you to 6 weeks or whatever, but there's going to be a period after that where there's going to be another report to council. Would it be worthwhile updating the entire audit committee after that second report? So instead of waiting till our next meeting of September 9th, that we have a further report or a further meeting in, let's say, 8 weeks from now.
Well, it's easy for me to volunteer others, but I certainly think if you as a collective were inclined to an extra meeting, by the time you have so there'll be a report publicly available roughly this time next week, like Wednesday or Thursday next week. The one that Teresa and Charlotte are working on will be entered the public domain, right, with our published deadline. And so 6 weeks after that, we'll have much better, yet again, informed one. You'll have three reports, two of which we had time to write and think about, and we'll be well into the event. So certainly some professional guidance on that, some commentary on how we're presenting the data, because let's face it, this is not a traditional report or event for us. We're working on what we think is a reasonable way, but certainly open to feedback there. And then beyond that, on whatever advice you see fit to give, reasonableness of expenditures, how we're characterizing them, whatever that happens to be. I think there'd be a lot of benefit in this committee providing that. The council's shown itself to have a pretty fair, adept hand at the social and political and sort of daily life service impacts of coronavirus. We've been doing a lot of reporting on those things. We've had very good dialogue, and council's made a number of decisions. So I think it's in good hands there. We haven't yet presented it with the detailed financial analysis. The first report really, I don't know if it was written in 36 hours, maybe something like that. It was, my terminology, quick and dirty. It was reasonable, but so now you'd have a couple to really sink the teeth into, and I think that'd be a good use of time, because we would like to get independent guidance if we could. Or validation of the staff approach or suggestions for improvement, because we're not flying blind. We're trying to do as other municipalities are. Teresa and Charlotte get to hear from other area treasurers so that we're not, completely out in left field, but we're also using our best guesses as far as a reasoned approach.
Okay,
so another meeting in 8 weeks.
My question would be, should we be then meeting shortly after the next council meeting or after that second report?
I think after that. Well, if I had my druthers, I would have this group meet just after the second report. And the reason I say that is, council will make its substantially its political decisions and its resource allocation decision. That's fine. But where we could get better, or maybe we can't get better, I don't know. But then this group could really talk about the manner in which we're presenting the data, the manner in which we're accounting. We're throwing everything in one ledger, right, to the best of my knowledge. Or correct me if I'm wrong. But I think we're throwing all of it in just one ledger at the moment for simplicity, so we have a corona cost, says the non-accountant, right? But that's kind of how I think we're doing it. So I think there's as Michael was saying, he feels we've improved how we're presenting data so far, and we're doing that because we had a bunch of suggestions. I'd kind of like to see if we've got we're on the right track vis-a-vis Corona costs, and you've got perspectives from other organizations, so that would be useful.
Or does, I'm just curious, or does the committee want to see the second report right before it goes to council? I don't know.
I don't think that really matters because we wouldn't have time to provide any input anyway. So if we do it before or after, I don't think the timing matters that much. I mean, I would assume your regular reporting anyway is going to identify the revenue loss, revenue deficit drops and things anyway. So, but.
Yeah, I think I might see it a little bit differently. If you're looking for feedback from this group on how to present data, and if there's anything we can bring from our respective sectors on us working through this same pandemic, I think it's probably advantageous to do before the council meeting. If you want that feedback for incorporation at the council meeting, from a timing perspective, that would definitely make more sense from my end. The other thing, and it's just a comment, and that's not to say that the team's not already doing this. And I'm just going to pick up on your one comment, Dave, about either going to be a higher cost or less efficient. I think realizing we're not going back to or we're not going to see anything normal in the next year probably or so. I would just suggest keep an open mind. Look at this as an opportunity to how things are being done and whether or not they can be done differently. That may not fall into the analogy you used earlier about less efficient and more cost. So I'm not saying that you can do that on everything, but try and take this as an opportunity to revisit some of the stuff that's currently being done at the town and whether or not there's opportunities that you can incorporate into this report to help mitigate this loss and actually come out of this a little bit more efficient in the long run, to be honest with you. I know that that's an approach we're taking at our organization, and it's actually, I'm suspecting it's going to pay dividends down the road. So anyways, just a comment for consideration as you're developing the various reports as relates to this.
Oh, fair enough. We have a bit of money set aside in the budget to look at office and spacing allocations on our second floor, which is the sort of tightest jam we have corporately. And the people on the second floor, in particular, planners and development engineering types who look over, figure out where pipes are going to go and the like, have been really efficient in working from home. So we're absolutely not going forward with spending any unnecessary money, one, but two, try to do space reallocation if it's possible to keep working from home 3 days a week or 4 days a week and reduce that office demand. So I take your point, absolutely.
I just want to mention one more thing. With regards to the COVID report, I am looking at 3 different areas. I'm looking at the impact to cash flow, the impact to the 2020 operating budget, and also if there are any impacts to the 2021 budget. So those are the 3 areas that I'm looking that the report will address.
Okay, so we've got next meeting date of September 9th. I'm not hearing any opposition of meeting earlier than that. What would the recommended or suggested date that we meet next?
Can we?
I think if you do want us, if you do want us to provide input on that second report, we should meet before it in a way that we could provide input that would be otherwise I don't see the value in meeting any sooner.
Yeah, Mike. So, Michael, I think another benefit of meeting sooner, if we leave it to the September, what date was it? September 9th date. That'll be the first time we're getting a financial report for 2020 fiscal year, which is probably another reason why it makes sense to have a meeting between now and that date, just to get a status update on finances for the calendar year as well. So I think you can make more of an agenda out of it, other than just the feedback on the COVID situation. But yeah. I don't know when, so maybe that's over to David. I don't know what the date is of the meeting, or maybe this is something we take offline and staff gets back to us with proposed dates. I think that might be an option to consider.
Yeah, and sorry to, my preference would be for us to meet a little more frequently anyway. So I'm in agreement with that. And especially with respect to the financial statements, we won't, not seeing anything until September's a long time.
Well,
so
probably
instead of putting you on the spot, David, why don't the suggestion was, why doesn't staff come back to us and provide a suggested date instead of trying to fix a date right now?
Well, we've heard your commentary. How about we get back to you later on this week? Maybe I won't promise tomorrow, but
we won't say this. We won't hold you.
And we'll give you a couple of options and show you where they are relative to the council meetings, and then you can pick amongst those.
It's fair.
Yeah, sounds good.
And we're either going to tell me that it starts at 4 and be real clear about that, or we're going to start at 5. In my brain, it's 5.
Well,
whichever.
We're going to set the meeting and tell you a different time.
Nice. That's my easy way out.
We'll tell you an hour early just to be sure.
This is what I look like, egg on face, huh?
And actually, I think just with respect to our ability to meet this way, will hopefully free up a schedule a little bit. Whereas before I was trying to work around vacation and things. I mean, I can do this when I'm on the road somewhere if I have to. So I think we have more flexibility in dates.
Good.
Yeah. Great. Perfect. Okay. So any other comments or from the committee? No. So why don't we move to adjournment, that this regular meeting of the Pelham Finance and Audit Committee be adjourned. Could I have a mover, please? Bill, Michael, seconder, all in favor? Okay, so carried. So thanks, everyone. Great work.
Thank you.
Again.
Go Lions.
Thank you.
Get my
Bye.
Vikings background up.